Or when a union does something like jeopardizing the work of their fellow men, if you stop trains, people can't get to their work, can they? Can they? They can't get to work even. So in doing what you want for yourself, you're jeopardizing your fellow men, aren't you? Yeah. Well, why can't you act in concert with your fellow men? Why do you have to do something which endangers the livelihood of your fellow men? When that statue represents exactly that, helping, not hindering.
Because it might be that the fellow, that one fellow, to take two workers at one fellow, is a lot worse off than the other worker. They're not all equal, are they? I mean, if they were all equal, there'd be no problem.
Precisely, but it comes down to a question of morality. You don't just work for another £1. When I took my job at £3.10 a week, ASM in small parts, I come out the army, 47, that's what I got. 47 or £3.10 a week, my digs were 25 bob all in. And the rest, I had the soap and the fags, you know. And with the odd bit of harpic to shove round the bend, because I did my own cleaning. But I saved, and because I wanted to do the job and wanted to do it well, I got another rep fortnightly, and then after that I got monthly rep, you know, and I got a bit better. I did 7 years in the provinces before I came to London. And I think if you're prepared to do that kind of thing, you're doing it. What are you doing it for? You're not saying I want another £1 all the time. You're saying I want to do the work better.
Yes, but
now, that was the kind of morality I was brought up with. But don't do a job just for what you get. You do the job because you want to do it well.
Oh, but Kenneth, can I say I think that's crap? I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I really...
I've never been so insulted.
Kenneth?
Good evening. Well, that was a clip from a recent show, and I got rather emotional about something said by Kenneth Williams, and I wasn't the only one to get hot under the collar. A lot of you wrote in, many in support of Mr. Williams and some against. He was raising a lot of issues that are relevant to all of us. Mr. Williams asked for a greater time to put forward his views, and what better week than this week, with all of us affected by gas strikes, hospital strikes, rail strikes, and the possibility of a general strike. We're going to talk about this and other matters tonight, but without a politician or a pundit in sight. In the audience, some of the ordinary men and women who wrote to us about what Kenneth Williams said. And with me also Kenneth Williams, of course, to expand his views, and Jimmy Reid, who is more than likely to disagree with some of them, if not all of them. I think what I'd like to do, gentlemen, first of all, is to establish the sort of backgrounds that you come from, because I think one of the misconceptions people might have about you, Kenneth, is that you came from some kind of privileged background.
Yes. Well, I don't think actually that many of the British public would think that, or not many of them, because it's been said in so many newspaper articles, and I've said it myself on television, that my father was a van boy on the LMS. I've said that again and again. He used to call the company the Yellow Mess. That's why I always remembered it. Yeah. And my mother took in washing, and she always tells a marvellous story about her. She had to wheel her washing to a hotel in Piccadilly, and she said, I'll never forget the day she had to wheel it in a little trolley, all her laundry, and she said, I'll never forget the day the wheel come off, the axle broke, and it broke near Eros, and under Eros in them days was those women that sold them flowers, with their lovely hats on there, huge hats. They sold these flowers under Eros, the statue. And she said, one of them said, don't worry, girl, and she pulled out of her enormous hat a great steel hat pin and stuck it through the axle for my mother. And the wheel, you know, did work again, and she was able to take her laundry on. And it always stuck in my memory. That's why I remember actually what they did. I remember my father, because of his funny story about, you know, the title of the company. Yes. I remember my things that my mother did from the funny story she's told me about her work.
Was it a large family, Kenneth?
Was it what?
A large family.
My father and my mother and my sister and myself.
Yes. It was, in fact, a very sort of what we call underprivileged background, wasn't it?
They lived in one room off the Caledonian Road, yes. I suppose it would be called underprivileged, yes.
Did you, by any standards it would be called that, did you feel yourself in any way underprivileged when you were a child?
It's in the sense of seeing other people having better conditions than I had and feeling that I really should have them too. I suppose as a child, and that did occur once or twice with children at school who were better dressed than I was, I did feel occasionally twinges of envy about it, and I did say as much to my father on one occasion. And he did say something to me about, we're instructed, you know, by the Bible, not to covet our neighbour's goods, and told me it was wrong to think like that. And so I thought, oh, yes, it is wrong to think like that, and proceeded to adjust my thinking. What my father told me during my lifetime was very, very important to me. He gave me a lot of maxims to live by, and he also told me never to bring, he said, don't ever make friends with anyone you can't bring to this home. which was, I thought, very good advice. I mean, I didn't think it was good at the time, but I do think it was very good now. And in fact, I obeyed it too.
But basically what you said there, of course, is interesting because of the background, the environment you came from, it gave you an ambition to get away from it.
Oh, no, it didn't, no. In fact, I went back there to live long afterwards. I made many, many good friends there and still have got them there. And so, I mean, the only way it offends me still would be said to be aesthetically. Obviously, aesthetically, the buildings aren't as lovely in that part of the world as, say, they are in, well, should say the city of Westminster, some purlieus of Kensington or Marylebone. Aesthetically, yes, they could be said to be offensive, I suppose. But in terms of people that live there and the qualities of those people, they're as good as anywhere else in London.
But you don't live there now?
I don't live there now. I left, and I moved back there in 70, and now I've moved again.
Fine.
But that's nothing to do with the environment. That's to do with trying to create a soundproof place where I can learn lines.
All right, fine. Jimmy, can I... You must have brought the cast of your play with you, Kenneth, I think. Jimmy, can I ask you the same question, too? I mean, you obviously didn't come from a privileged background. Was yours a large family?
Well, it was to start with. We had 7 in the family. 5 sisters and brother and myself. 3 of my sisters died in infancy. And the doctors could put many things on the death certificate, but I think they should really have put social conditions. And one of the factors which has made me so concerned about changing society is that even this day, the way the sociologists break our society up into social categories. The bottom 2 social categories, the incidence of infant mortality is 50% higher than the top 2 social categories. And so I come from a family of 7, but only 4 of us lived into childhood. 3 died as infants, and as I say, no one will persuade me otherwise than the real cause of their death was the social circumstances in the Clyde side at the time.
Was this the kind of thing that shaped you as a political animal that you became?
Yes, there's no doubt about this, yes. To some extent, you know, some of the most vicious anti-working class elements are people who have made it from the working class. You go to South Africa and some of the worst jailers in apartheid's prisons are black men. I've always felt that we shouldn't want to emancipate the working class one by one, starting with yourself. That if you've got talents and abilities or capacities, it should be at the service of the people from which you come.
So that's why, in fact, you've never left the area?
That's why, in fact, there's been a deliberate decision on my part that I want to advance living standards-wise, along with the people that I revere and indeed love above all else, and that is the working people from which I come.
Now, Kenneth, can I talk to you because before you were an actor, you did many jobs, didn't you?
Yeah.
What were they? I mean, what sort of work did you do?
Well, first of all, I was an apprentice. I was an apprentice draftsman.
Yes.
Lithographic.
Yes.
And then, of course, that career was interrupted by the army.
Yes.
Which involved a personal choice, which I really wasn't very happy about at all, because, I mean, I've been brought up in Christian faith, and I thought, well, the idea of holding guns and killing people is abhorrent to me, quite apart from the fact that I'm not really born for that kind of thing. I mean, I don't look good. I don't look good with guns, you know what I mean? Some people can hold them and all, you know, and look kind of tough. And it really isn't my forte. We have to accept this as part of one's limitations, don't we? As I reminded you last week. We have all got them, haven't we? We've all got them, and so I didn't really like that. Now, I went to my father again and said, I don't really want to join the army, and he said, look, this country's facing a tyrant. I mean, mainly put in those words, but he said Hitler was an evil man, and that the situation had become such in Europe that the only thing to do was to fight. And I believed what he said was true, because I thought he was in a better position than I to judge. I was only 18. He was considerably wiser than I was, and he'd been through another war, which he'd thought was fought for good reasons too at that time. But he certainly thought this was even a better reason. And so I did join the army, and I spent 3 years of my life in the army, which of course was an awful thing for me to do. You must remember it entailed not only conscience, i.e. I didn't believe in killing, and I was being put into a machine that did exactly that, killing. But it also, which involved, you know, infringement on my freedom, and it also involved a way of life which I'd never faced. I mean, I never undressed in public at all, and I did not like taking my, no, you may think it's funny, it's not. I don't like taking my clothes off in front of a lot of people. I don't like it, and in barrack rooms I had to, so I used to arrange the shirt, you know, to cover the dick, and then they'd shout at you, because in barrack rooms it was about 70 men as well as myself. They'd say, go on, show us your willy, go on, get it out, go out, marry her, you know, and accuse you of a lack of manhood because you didn't show it. So eventually I got exhibitionistic and started going, showing it almost in defiance.
But can I pull you back to the main point of our discussion, which is not about your army experiences? I was going to ask you, did you in fact, at any time, did you ever join a union?
No, I never consciously joined a union before I was in the theatre, no.
No.
I mean, I was made to join in the draftsman set up by the head draftsman who said, you have to sign this, the Society of the Lithographic Artists and Engravers. You've got to sign that form because we all do it. And I was very young, and I was 14 when I was apprentice. I didn't really know what it was on about, and I certainly didn't read the small print. No. So I joined it because he said it was good for us all, and I did it. And I respected the head draftsman, too. Another instance of recognising limitations, Michael.
Yes.
I recognised that he was a better man than I was at drawing maps, and so he deserved a higher salary.
So we established that, in fact, you didn't instinctively go to a union or want to join a union for help. Can I ask you one final question, Kenneth? When you were, at this time, you were still living at home, still in this area that you described, did you ever, at any time, have a sense of waste of the people around you, for the society you were in?
Yes, always. That was always conscious. I'm always conscious of that, yes. I was always conscious of the fact that around them was many things. I mean, you remember Betjeman saying, when you walk about, look at things, use your eyes. You remember him saying that? It's much more profound an observation than I think many people did realise. And it is a very marvellous observation to have made. It's an essential one, of course, for a poet, but it's also absolutely applicable to us as people. And, of course, in my environment, I saw waste, yes, and was conscious of it. Conscious of the fact that the public library was not being taken advantage of by the people in my street. Conscious of the fact that art galleries weren't being taken advantage of. Conscious of the fact that further educational facilities were not being taken advantage of. Conscious of the fact there were men in that community who wanted to give something of themselves to others and only had 3 or 4 turn up to even hear them. So I was conscious of waste, if you ask me about that. Yes, I was certainly conscious.
But certainly never conscious of the trade union as something that might help to alleviate that waste at all.
Never conscious of the trade union as something that might help to alleviate that waste. No, the local authorities provided plenty of opportunities to channel the frustrations of people, and they seem to me very little taken advantage of.
Yes, well, we'll get onto that, I'm sure, about whose fault that is. Jimmy, do you have anything to say before I replay our little set 2 last week about what Kenneth has been saying at all? I mean, you came from very, very similar backgrounds in many ways, and yet you've arrived at totally different conclusions about society.
Well, I think we've yet to decide that, Michael.
Well, I think we've yet to decide that.
Well, okay, we'll wait and see how it goes, but what was the point, Michael?
I was just going to say, but to listen to Kenneth there, if you could, even at this point, feel what the difference was.
Yeah, well, you take this question of waste, and I'm not talking here about sewage disposal, but the waste of human potential, which I consider a tragedy. I do believe that in the society in which both you and I grew up to manhood, there was tremendous human waste. Because you see, coming from a working class background, you not only have an inherited economic disadvantage, but you have an inherited cultural and intellectual poverty. I'm not talking here genetically, but if there are 4 or 5 of you in the one room and they all talk about equal educational opportunities, and you contrast that with the son of a solicitor living in a well-off area, you have a bright lad living with 3 sisters, whatever, there's hardly even room to read, apart from the fact there may not be books about. There hasn't been this example set by the parents of reading and studying. That apart, even doing homework or trying to find some spot where you can think things out for yourself, you're at a positive disadvantage as compared, let's say, to the upper middle-class youngster who's got a room of his own almost from birth. And one of the problems, I mean, I Michael, love music. I'm sure I will die not really having fully appreciated some of the wonders of music. Some of the blinkers have come off my eyes during my life, but there's a wonderful world there, for example, and I'm starting off, you know, there's an inbuilt disadvantage for the working class kids.
There's somebody to blame for it.
There is society to blame for it.
Fine. Okay, well then now let's revive that sequence from the show when I had the original disagreement with Kenneth. If they can roll it now, Roger, and let's have a look and see what was said, and we can take the debate on from there.
Or something and go on strike. Why can't, I mean, if unions really care, if they're really socialistic and say we care about our fellow man, why can't they march about something like that? Instead of another pound for themselves, why not a few pounds for somebody else who's really hard up?
But that's not the union's problem.
I've got support here.
It's not the union's fault, that
yes,
condition.
Look, what is the statue outside the TUC? Have you looked at that statue? The statue outside the TUC depicts a man helping, doesn't it? He's helping up another man who's on the ground.
Yes.
And that statue symbolises what the TUC stands for, doesn't it?
Of course.
Right, well, when a union does something like jeopardising the work of their fellow men, if you stop trains, people can't get to their work, can they? Can they? They can't get to work, even. So in doing what you want for yourself, you're jeopardising your fellow men, aren't you?
Yes.
Well, why can't you act in concert with your fellow men? Why do you have to do something which endangers the livelihood of your fellow men? When that statue represents exactly that, helping, not hindering.
Because it might be that the fellow, that one fellow, to take two workers at one fellow, is a lot worse off than the other worker. They're not all equal, are they? I mean, if they were all equal, there'd be no problem.
Precisely, but it comes down to a question of morality. You don't just work for another pound. When I took my job at £3.10 a week, ASM in small parts, I come out the army, 47, that's what I got. 47, or £3.10 a week, my digs were 25 bob all in. And the rest, I had the soap and the fags, you know. And with the odd bit of harpic to shove round the bend, because I did my own cleaning. But I saved, and because I wanted to do the job and wanted to do it well, I got another rep fortnightly, and then after that I got monthly rep, you know, and I got a bit better. I did 7 years in the provinces before I came to London. And I think if you're prepared to do that kind of thing, you're doing it. What are you doing it for? You're not saying I want another pound all the time. You're saying I want to do the work better.
Yes, but
now, that was the kind of morality I was brought up with. But you don't do a job just for what you get. You do the job because you want to do it well.
Oh, but Kenneth, can I say I think that's crap? I'm sorry. I really...
I've never been so insulted.
Kenneth?
Whose side you on?
See, it's all very well you saying that. It's all very well all of us here in jobs that are creative, where you can see if you go work, if you've got a talent, you can get to the top, and you can get, you know, handsome living. Now, you're not going to tell me that you are going to be compared with somebody who's sticking door handles on a car for 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, that he's not going to get frustrated, that he doesn't deserve an extra quid if he wants one. Of course his work ethic is money. It's got to be. He doesn't get the satisfaction from the job that we get. I mean,
that's true. Of course it's true. You've talked...
Of course it's true.
His inference is the man who's singing the doorknobs on has got a job that's monotonous and dreary.
Absolutely.
What do you think doing something night after night? I've done this play now at the Globe. I mean, I've said it so many times I'm beginning to wonder what it means, you know. You keep on saying anything long enough and you begin to think you're daft, don't you?
I mean, that's the trouble. I mean, everybody does seem to think that our work is glamorous.
It's fabulous. They're fabulously glamorous. Not at all. It's a simple business of self-discipline and going on night after night and doing it as well as you can.
Right,
and if I have to stick doorknobs on, and I've done it, I've stuck doorknobs on, I've painted my own walls when I haven't got the money to employ a decorator, I'll do it because I like doing it, I want to do it well.
But the other difference is, Kenneth, that the guy who goes on strike is not earning your salary. He's not earning 400 or 500 quid a week.
What about the period I didn't have any success, and I spent, what, 7 years in the provinces bumming around? That wasn't very successful.
No, of course not. But there was always because you backed your talent, because your talent went in an area where talent pays off in the end, then you had a horizon, you could see ahead.
Well, what are you asking for? A world where every single job leads to some marvellous end?
Yes.
Well, all jobs can't be like that.
Well, precisely.
And that's the problem.
But nevertheless...
I mean, so therefore you must allow people their frustrations.
No, they must accept their limitations, surely.
We don't get pensions.
Come on.
They must be allowed to.
That's a Superman argument.
It isn't. Voltaire said every man must dig in his own bit of garden. There wasn't much wrong with Voltaire's philosophy, was there?
No.
Right, well, that's a revision of what was said last week. Kenneth, you said that you wanted some time to expand on that. It seemed to me that you raised 2 points there, 2 basic points. One was your attitude toward the unions, and the other one was this thing about individual opportunity.
Yes.
I'd like you to talk, first of all, perhaps just elaborate a wee bit, not too long, on what you think about the unions, what you're saying there.
Well, what I meant about a strike which involves destruction, misery, and suffering to human beings was that I felt it was antisocial. And the observation I was making was an ironic one, i.e. an organization which calls itself socialistic, i.e. a trade union, I've always thought of trade unions as socialistic, carries out an act by depriving people of the means of getting to and from their work, which is in actual fact anti-social. I was commenting on that and contrasting it with the spirit of that statue outside the TUC, and I don't think they had that statue put there for nothing. I was saying the spirit of that is very contrary to the spirit evinced in causing hardship and suffering to your fellow men in these strikes, you see. So I was observing a fact which I thought was an ironic truth. Now, I could also observe an ironic truth when I say that I don't believe in laws that repress individuals. On the other hand, I would agree that a law like the one which says you shall forcibly make your children go to a school, and if you don't, there will be an inspector call and make you send them to school, I would have to admit that that law is a good one. Do you see what I mean? But it's an irony also that the law involved here, that of a parent not being able to choose to educate his child himself, you see, is an infringement of his liberty. That is an infringement of his liberty.
Yes.
You know that, don't you?
But
I'm agreeing there that the law is, in actual fact, doing something which, in curtailing his liberty, is doing something basically wrong in my philosophy, but I'm prepared to accede to it because I think that it will, in the long run, result in lasting good.
But you were saying about the unions, that basically what you said there was that you don't think that people should strike if they're going to disrupt in any way their fellow human beings.
Not if they cause misery and suffering to human beings, no, because that seems to be antisocial. Now, I did also say, no, wait a minute, I did also say in that same clip, didn't I, that the union should act in concert, i.e. I am not denying their right to strike. I'm not denying that. I'm not denying that at all, but I'm saying they can act in concert. Do you see?
Do you mean they can all strike together and then nobody gets affected?
Precisely.
I see. Jimmy,
Yeah.
can I just have a brief comment on what Kenneth said from you before I talk to you?
Well, first of all, honestly, it's so wrong, in my estimation, because it puts the blame for workers, let's say, that are forced into circumstances where they have to take strike action. It puts the blame of any inconvenience on the public on their shoulders and not on the shoulders of those that are denying them what they consider to be legitimate grievances or rights or demands. Let me give you an example. We've got a strike in this country just now of ancillary hospital workers. The first time this century. For decades, they've been told you can't go on strike, your vocational interest and purpose is such that you can't go on strike. Okay then, where was the mechanism in this society which stated to hospital workers, you are providing a wonderful service to your fellow human beings and we will reward you accordingly? They didn't. They left them with miserable wages so that they had no alternative but to take some form of strike action whilst trying to safeguard the interests of the patient. So, why isn't your anger directed towards the government and the establishment that has kept such sections of the community at a wage level well below the contribution they make to society? You see, what I'm saying, in other words, Kenneth, that if the railwomen go on strike and it causes me inconvenience, I don't blame the railwomen. I say to Dick Marsh, what's wrong? Some of these fellas are getting 14 or 15 quid a week. Eh? You're all right with £24,000 a week. Some of the porters, don't kid yourself. £24,000 a year, Dick Marsh is telling them you can't have an extra couple of quid, it's not in the national interest. Well, he's walking home with £24,000 a year. I mean, per annum.
Well, let me...
He's not walking home with it, come on.
Well, I may not be walking home with it, but he needs
there's a hell of a difference.
security court to take his wages home anyway, I'll tell you that much.
Jimmy, you can also... You could make a point, and I think you would accept this, that the difference in wages between one union and another is often the fault of that union. The union that doesn't get the wage, the comparable wage.
Let me, can I explain my position there?
I mean, it's a fact, isn't it? Within the trade union movement, where you're all brothers, there are vast differences.
Yes.
So you can make an argument that it's the union's fault.
No.
Well, I think you can.
Well, just let me make a point on this, if you don't mind me saying so. I've listened to statements by Anthony Barber, and let's face it, even by right-wing Labour politicians, who have stated that the responsibility for lower-paid workers is the fact that there are higher-paid workers. Now, OK, so I'm a higher-paid worker, right? So we're going to negotiate a possible wage increase with my employer. And I know that we can get £5 a week out of him. So I say, look, we'll negotiate, we get £5 a week out of him. And I say, wait a minute, stop there, we don't want the £5 a week. There's 2,000 of us, that's £10,000 a week. Will you please take that £10,000 up the road there to this other firm where the workers are being lower paid? I say, but, I mean, after I pick the manager off the floor, mind you, and revive him, he'll say, but they're a bigger company than we are. And in point of fact, if you forgo wages as a higher wage earner or worker, it doesn't go into the pockets of the lower paid, it goes into the pockets of your employer. I mean, there is no mechanism, there's no device in this society whereby that the wages that the higher paid workers forgo is translated into money terms into the wages of the lower paid workers. And I'll give you by definition. A lower paid worker is a worker that works in an industry that's A, either badly organised, or B, is relatively well organised but has no militancy over the years. What you get as a worker depends on your organisation in trade unions and by your militancy. That's how this society rewards workers, not apportioning some moral evaluation as to the contribution that you're making.
But is the function of the union simply to get money? Is it simply to mug a government?
No. It's not simply to get money.
Well, all right. Then, why is it then that people have this attitude about unions? I think quite correctly nowadays that whenever they hear about them, this is what they're doing, is going for money. I mean, shouldn't the function of a union be a damn sight more idealistic than that? And aren't you, by just going after money, joining those people that you would say, the bosses, the money men, and joining their principles that you hate?
Well, look, let me...
I mean, aren't you part of the rat race, Jimmy?
Well, let me make this point perfectly clear here. There's... tremendously wrong, and I think deliberately misleading economic arguments going about, that prices are chasing wages. I mean, we could show the reverse. I can show the reverse in statistics here tonight. No, OK, we're not going to do that. OK, no statistics, right, all right.
Sick of statistics.
And I am conscious of the fact that workers are anxious to maintain and advance their living standards within this society. I would like a society where there wasn't employee-employer relations. I would like an end to industrial strife. Now, if you want an end to industrial strife, give us a classless society where there are no employers and employees. And that'll remove it. There'll be no conflict then. Then we'll look at the gross national product and apportion it and evaluate each person's contribution to society and reward them accordingly. Then I'll believe in an incomes policy, but not under this setup.
Well, let me make another point to you. They've been invited, the trade union movement, I think invite is the word, to have a one-day national strike, right?
Yeah.
What on earth good is that going to do, Jimmy, to anybody?
Well, let me make this point. See, we talk about powerful people in this society. And, if you read William Hickey in one of our prominent newspapers, you would think that the powerful people are the captains of industry, stockbrokers, bankers, and other people you see at horse shows, etc., Royal Ascot. All the important people, eh? Well, I'm prepared to volunteer the services of the Clyde workers. We'll build boats, luxury yachts, and we'll fill them full of food and all the rest of it, and we'll send these powerful, important people in British society touring the seas of the world for 6 or 9 months. And you know something? We wouldn't notice their absence unless some society columnist drew our attention to it, because they don't really matter. But let the workers, let the dockers go and simultaneously decide they're having a holiday. And Britain's in the brink of a national disaster, because it's the dockers, it's the engineers, it's the railwomen, it's the workers that are the really powerful people in this society. And I think if the TUC call a general strike one day, at least it will be a demonstration to the workers of who's the real power in this land, because we produce the wealth. Wealth isn't produced in any boardroom, it's produced on the factory floor, and it will demonstrate that fact to the workers in the first instance and give them a renewed confidence in their power and in their ability to shape developments and their own destinies. And I think that's the importance of this TUC decision.
Well, let's go to the audience now. Let's widen this debate to some of those people who wrote in. I want somebody who is opposed to what Mr. Reid has just said. Would that be you there, madam? You are, sorry?
Mrs. King.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
And what are you, Mrs. King? Are you
I'm a retired teacher.
Yes?
And Jimmy Weir says that he...
Jimmy Reid, love.
I beg his pardon.
It's all right.
Jimmy Reid says that he would like a classless society. And yet these trade union leaders set themselves up on their stool and they absolutely browbeat their members, it seems to me, in order to keep them where they should be, which is at the bottom to their top. And why is it that a person who joins a union must necessarily be expected to be a mere sycophant to the union leaders? And why, when the man at the hospital the other day went in and saw the conditions that were in his hospital and he could no longer find them acceptable because he had seen them, why was it that the union leaders came back to him and said, no, he was wrong, he must still not do his job? Surely to goodness, that is a class society, with the union leaders at the top absolutely dictating to their members at the bottom.
I think that's a very good point, Jimmy.
The idea of trade union leaders beating the rank and file into militant action is, in my experience, so far removed from reality. In point of fact, it's the rank and file that pressurise often trade union leaders for militant action. And if I had a criticism of trade union leaders in general, it's precisely that they are not sufficiently in contact with the members that pay their salaries in order to fight on their behalfs, and less understanding of the realities of life for their members. Yeah. I'm against trade union bureaucrats.
The careerists?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. It's one of the sicknesses in the trade union movement, and that is personal careerism.
But wait a minute, can I come down? I know there's a trade unionist there who was saying rubbish, Jimmy, when you were... Yeah. You are Mr... Sunnox. Mr... Michael Sunnox. Mr. Sunnox, you are a trade unionist?
Yeah.
You are?
Yeah.
A shop steward?
Yep.
Yes, you are. Right, what do you disagree with Jimmy about?
Well, let's go back to the one-day political strike that my union had. I won't mention the union. That makes me a spokesman. 98% of my people wanted nothing whatever to do with it. But it was my union who went to conference and raised their hands, and when they were travelling back on the train today, how the hell do we tell our people that we volunteered for a strike, for a one-day strike? Another section of the same firm said, we will black your product if you don't come out. So I stood on a railway crossing at 6 o'clock one morning with the glorious, triumphant union officials realising that all my men had lost a day's pay, and that strike achieved what I knew it would achieve, exactly nothing.
So, but what do you want to say to Jimmy about that?
Well, Jimmy says that the officials don't dictate to their members.
Yes.
They jolly well do.
Yes.
But the other thing that Jimmy says, which I approve of very much, is that we don't know the trade union leaders, and they are elected by a tremendously small percentage of trade unionists. We don't know them. An MP has got to come to his town, he's got to give his promises, he breaks them later, but he's got to come and give them, whichever party he's in. A trade union leader doesn't appear.
Sorry, there's a gentleman there. Go on.
What Mr. Reid was saying about in the hospitals, that there's this, you know, the unions are driving us, the driving force behind the workers. This isn't true, because I come from the Whitland Hospital, which is one of the biggest hospitals in the country, and there's no union representative come even down to us on this strike. This has come at the vote. There's about 600 people there, and at the vote for the strike, there was 7 against, and there isn't a union man there, and it's one of the biggest hospitals in the country. If they can only afford one steward for the whole of the hospital, surely it must be the workers who are behind for the pay increases, and it's not the steward pushing them because there's no militant stewards there. There's none there of any type.
No,
Just one.
No, listen, this is, I don't want you to develop this into a sort of union bashing programme or a pro-union programme or whatever. There was something else, let's widen it out a little bit further. I'm sure the unions will still come into it. Something that Kenneth said also in that little argument that we had, Kenneth, which is about the opportunities available in Britain today. You seem to be taking the point of view, and I know we had a lot of reaction on this, that no matter where you were in society, that if you had it, you'd get there. And that there were people who got that gift and they got it, that's fine. The others, well, let them stick handles on cars.
Yes. Well, I think that what we've all got to agree about is that there must be some general premise from which we start, and obviously start an agreement. Otherwise, there's no point. We just sit here exchanging dogmatism, and we get nowhere. So let's all agree on something fundamental, like, say, man's inalienable right to choice. I think James would agree with that, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Every man should, in any decent, healthy society, have the ability to choose for himself what he wants to do, what he wants to make his ends. He should have the ability to choose what he should make his ends. Now, when that same man tells me that wicked means justify those ends, I'm afraid I'm against him. I am not ever, on any occasion, going to say that wicked means justify good ends. If you tell me that in killing several people we're going to achieve what's going to be very good afterwards, I'm going to say to you it's not worth it, because human life is sacred, and I'm not interested in this end process which is going to arrive at some other date. In this sense, you see, Christianity and communism are at one. They all offer us paradises somewhere else. You know, after the 5-year plan is going to be lovely, after something's going to be lovely. I want to know now. And in the society I was brought up in, now was available. I could go to the public library and read about English literature for free. I could go to the National Gallery and see everything from a Van Dyck to any of the Impressionists for nothing. I could go and read books. I could go and see lovely pictures. I've always been very interested in both. I could hear lovely music for free, lunchtime concerts organised by SEMA and all those sorts of organisations. They're still available to people too. And so if we're talking about the quality of life, and certainly I think it's the quality of life that makes an individual interesting, then I think our society, as we know it today, gives us the opportunity to indulge ourselves in enjoying those qualities.
Fine.
But I think it must also ensure that a man does have the right to choose. Now, if that man wants to choose as his ends, say, Christianity, I think he's every right to pursue them. And I think we must, in our society, acknowledge his right to pursue those ends. If, in pursuing them, he gets in the way of an awful lot of people and causes bloodshed and suffering, then I don't think his means to that end can be justified.
But society does enough. That's what you're saying. Society
Our society's a very good one. Just compare it with some in the world.
Well, then, all right. But there's some people in this audience who would disagree with you, actually, on that. And I know one is Mrs. Diana Pierce, who wrote you a letter. Where's Diana Pierce? There you are, Diana. Now, you took Kenneth up on this very point, didn't you? Could you tell me you're a mother?
I've got 3 sons.
Yes.
And, well, my eldest son is 8 years of age. He has shown to have a potential in mathematics. Our greatest dream for him is to go to a school not far from where we live, which is a wonderful school and would help him fulfil his potential. The uniform for this school alone would be in the region of £60-odd. We couldn't afford that. Just the uniform alone, and let alone exchange holidays to help further in the course of his education. And even if we could manage to afford this money somehow, I have 2 other sons also to bring up, and the 3 no. I mean, how can we choose one of them?
And what are you saying basically then? What's the basic disagreement you would have with Kenneth?
You say we've got choice. My 3 sons, yes, they have choice. They can decide, as on our level, my husband is a factory worker. Their choice at the moment is whether to go into factory work, as the father does, or to start this fight in ordinary schools, and if they're very, very lucky, they possibly can make it. No matter what their potential is, it's luck in all these cases.
Yeah.
Well, could I put a point here? Could I put a point here? The Mrs. Reid, is it?
Mrs. Pierce.
Mrs. Pierce. Sorry. Mrs. Pierce.
I don't think so.
Would you agree that the freedom for you to talk the way you're talking now is perfectly valid in itself?
Of course.
It is a valid freedom.
Yes.
Thank you. And would you also agree that by your voicing the complaint you have now voiced, there is a probability that your complaint will be heard by somebody who will react to it? Do you think that is a possibility?
I dearly hope so.
But, Mrs. Pierce, you are able to do it, aren't you?
Yes.
And so there is a validity in that freedom, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Thank you.
Kenneth, can I make a point here about freedom of choice? Freedom of choice. I mean, all of us are free tomorrow to put our names down on a list to buy a Rolls Royce. That's a freedom that applies to all of us. Only some of us can exercise that freedom of choice. 99% of us can't. When we come to London, at least when I come to London, I'm free to stay at the Savoy. But it's a freedom that's an abstract freedom so far as I'm concerned, because it's not really a choice that's available to me and to the great majority of the British people. Wait a minute.
Does it render it invalid?
Listen, yes, indeed it does.
So you're saying
because I'll tell you this much, we've got freedom of the press in this country. But in order, I've got the same freedom as Sir Max Aitken. The only thing is, he's a multimillionaire, right, that has a newspaper, right? So he can exercise that freedom of the press that's there and dictate editorials that are in line with his ideological thinking. For me and for all of these people, it's an abstract freedom. And I think when we talk about freedom, we should get from abstractions to reality. Let me put this point. You go and knock on an old age pensioner's door, and they come there and you say, "How are you getting on, old man?" He says, "Terrible." And incidentally, let's face it, there was an old woman in Liverpool who was found in her house, choked to death because she was eating cardboard. And in the same paper, we had some other fellow, Norbury Enterprises, spent £500,000 on an aeroplane. £500,000 with 3 bedrooms in his aeroplane. You go to the old age pension and you say, "Well, look, Pop, OK then, you're having a hard time of it. You've only got a few quid. Yes, I can't even get tobacco. You're not eating too well. No, I hardly see meat." You say, "Don't worry, you're free." The old fella probably say, "I'm free to starve." Now, I tell you, let's take Shelley's Mask of Anarchy, where he talks about what is freedom. Freedom also is to have the freedom to bring up your children in such a way as to realise their full potential, to be free from the fear of poverty, to be free from the fear of war. These are freedoms which I find establishment politicians never talk about. And the woman's quite right. The freedom of choice that you're talking about in a whole vast area is non-existent for the great majority of working class people in this country, and therefore it's an abstraction.
Well, let's David Hart, I think. Where's David Hart? Because he wrote on...
Yes.
David, there you are. I think, is that something that you basically agree with, what Jimmy just said?
I'm very impressed with what Jimmy's saying, yes. I didn't actually write in, and I was invited. Now, I say that because that changes the category I'm in.
Yes.
And I'm interested, for example, in this situation, where when we were warming up beforehand, you said to us, in fact, somebody else, the producer, said it earlier too, we've got no pundits here, we've got no experts, we've got you, who are ordinary people. Now, that category of ordinary people seems to me a cultural category, which is, again, perpetuating an idea that somehow we're here, but we're not really to be taken seriously, that we're not expected really to be responsible for what we're doing, but I'm not sure what it is. There's a kind of fashionable thing now about listening to ordinary people. Politicians talk about the man in the street, the mass of the people, and I don't think of myself like that, but there are enormous pressures, you know, not to feel serious, not to feel as if you matter. Yes?
Yes.
But I think I don't think that's present in the quality of our discussion, do you?
Oh, very much so, yes, of course.
The idea that we're not serious? We are being serious.
No, that we are here as ordinary people who are not quite expected.
Well, it's not meant. It's not meant in any.
I'm sorry if you felt insulted by that.
No, it's a general category that one finds oneself in.
No,
yes, through the media.
I actually am agreeing with you about that, and it's very interesting you should raise that point, because lots of people have said again and again in this country, "Oh, why doesn't he stick to his job? You know, make people laugh. What right has he got to discuss this and that and the other? And especially about subjects he knows nothing about. All that kind of thing goes on." Well, on that ground, you might as well say that when you appoint a man, a minister of, say, of agriculture and fisheries, and this goes on, be it a socialist administration or a conservative one, he may well never have done any agriculture or fishing in his life, but he does take the department over, and very often, you know, in England, has run it very efficiently. There have been examples of it with plenty of ministers who've done that, and you could call it laissez-faire, but it still works, and it works very well.
I see. Can I bring Rhodes Boyston in here, who is the headmaster of a comprehensive school in London? Rhodes, you want to say something about what Jimmy was saying?
Yes, and also about the question of freedom of choice of the lady we talked to before.
Yes.
With 3 children, because it's a real problem to her. I don't think Well, I would say for a beginning on this that we're probably as open society as we will ever achieve. We will improve, but we could go back. I don't think you'll ever get a 100% effective educational system, no more than you'll get a 100% effective engine. I mean, insofar that the Prime Minister himself, that Harold Wilson, that the head of the civil service all came from ordinary schools through the system. I mean, I believe Sir William Armstrong started in London in an intermediate school, and before he transferred to a grammar school as they existed at that time, shows that people come to the top. And I was brought up in Lancashire, and many of the people who grew up with me are university professors and lecturers, etc., etc. And we did boast, and a Labour minister boasted 6 or 7 years ago in Europe, that we had a higher percentage of university intake from the working class than any other country in the Western world. And Jimmy Reid and I may fall out about this, but I would say even probably east of the Iron Curtain from what figures of 6 or 7 articles that I've come across from the percentage going up there. What we have to move through is as open educational system as is possible. Now, on this particular problem here, people who have enough money have choice to buy outside the system to an extent. So the people inside, in many cases, have not choice because they've paid their right rates and taxes, and there is not enough left after that to have the effective choice. What we have to do, and this boils down to Kenneth Williams' freedom as well, and I'm a great believer in this freedom and the self-motivation of this, is to organise a system whereby by a parent power or choice of school, or the giving of a voucher for choice of school, that parents can pressurise the system the way that they want it. I mean, you're moving at the present time from this country from a bipartite system where there's something like 25% past the 11 plus, and it was 10% inefficient and 90% efficient. And then we get into a system of comprehensive schools, which are really neighbourhood schools on the American pattern now, on ghettos. The difference is just the same, except can you afford to buy a house now in the good catchment area of that comprehensive school that's sending people up to university, not the other? We thought we were moving towards a more equal society. It is quite possible that we shall be looking in 10 or 15 years' time and saying it is probably harder to come back, through on neighbourhood schools unless you have vast community development and EPA within it than it was before. And I don't think there is a millennium. We have to move to this. Could I just make pick Jimmy Reid up on one other point?
Please.
Which worries me, and I would hope it worried him so that he could perhaps help me to get a solution for it. And that is, despite deprivation, and many of us have come from similar backgrounds to the two speakers today, the amazing thing was that against that deprivation, many people came through, like Jimmy Reid and Ken Williams did themselves, with different views at the present point of time. We seem to structure more and more organised education, that if it goes at 5 and to stay till 21 almost on an automatic escalator. And yet one wonders the amount of real education that's coming at the end. You were talking about music, and I'm not a great music. There's other things like literature and theology, which I enjoy reading, of a similar nature. But in the 19th century, in my native Lancashire, of which I write, in the 1880s, there was one period before Christmas, the Sunday before Christmas, when out of a town of 13,000, 7,000 sung the Messiah in the churches. Now, I'm not saying they should all sing religious music, but they sang it. There was at that time 7 cooperative movements in that town, etc., friendly societies. Now, after structuring education to the extent we've got, it's supposed to increasing opportunity, and it has, as an open society. We have a situation now where there's no choirs in Haslingden. I don't live there now. I'm in London, obviously, at Highbury. There are no brass bands in Haslingden. There are no cooperative societies. It's like Marks and Spencer's. It's part of cooperative retail. And, you know, I think when we're moving forward to the future, we have to move very carefully, to realising that we're probably as open society as we are likely to get. And unless we are careful in what we are doing, we may blow the whole thing up and go back again.
Jimmy?
Well, first of all,
I think here I must take the gentleman up on a point. I think that statistics show that the percentage of working class kids going into university has increased as a part of the overall university population. And indeed it's revealing to try and show the advances made socially by the underprivileged of the working class, that the statistics bear out that the percentage over 30 or 40 years has by and large remained unchanged. There are more working class kids going to university, but as the same percentage of a greater total. Now, I'm not making that point on its own, because I'm a believer in comprehensive education, but I do not believe that the theory of comprehensive education will work without accompanying social policies. And I accept this fact that if you have a neighbourhood school in an underprivileged working class ghetto in Glasgow or London, they fail to attract teachers for a go-off and many other things. And therefore, we can't try and think of education as something that can be divorced by other social developments. And if you want my general opinion on education, I think it's too structuralised in a certain sense. I would rather see the essence of comprehensive education as something that believes fundamentally that each human being has got some potential to be developed, and that therefore the whole object of education should be to develop whatever latent talents each person has to the full, in order that they can contribute it to society for the satisfaction of everyone.
What if they ain't got any?
Well, I'll tell you this much, that's the most cynical observation in the human condition.
I see. Well, how do you account for the fact that some people are born with brain damage?
Well, that, if you don't mind me saying so, is an argument for special remedial measures to try and ensure that that person born with brain damage is able to maximise his contribution to society and his fellow human beings. And I will not accept any genetical argument based on the unfortunates who happen to be born with brain damage.
There are many people born that haven't got...
Accept genetic differences following the failure of Ledenko on grain?
Ah, listen, I'm prepared to accept that there are genetical differences, but I want to suggest something you said. Are you going to tell me that they're the main determining factor in how a person reaches a certain status?
Obvious potential, yes. Not of what he achieves. You have to have the open society to bring that potential out.
I want to ask you a question. If you had been born, say you're 50 years old, 50, I don't know, how old
47.
you are. 47? Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Right, you know.
I'm glad it's not your wife, incidentally. You'd have crucified me. OK, you're 47. If 47 years ago you'd been born into a primitive tribe in Borneo, would your genetic superiority have established you in a status of society where you're a headmaster of a comprehensive school or a senior secondary school in London? Of course not.
I might have been I might have been a tribal chief there.
That's right. Social circumstances have a large, they have a large factor. They're a large factor in determining.
That takes my point. I mean, if there's genetic potential, and it's our job in society to bring it all out, but I still think there will be differences, that some people can run people better.
Yes, exactly. There always will be differences.
And the brain is a physical function.
See, we accept that. Can I just finish?
Why don't we want the differences anyway? Let's all have the differences. It's what makes life wonderful, that people are different. If we're all going to be the same, it's weird.
Mrs. Pearce has a brain damaged child.
Yes, OK.
Mrs. Pearce, I mean, you can say something very personal on this, can't you?
Yes, my 4-year-old son Nicholas has got brain damage.
Yes.
He's at a special school and he is being educated to the best of the National Health's ability. And we have been told by psychologists that one day Nicholas will pass the boundaries of normality, whatever they are. There are clinics throughout this world that specialise in this, and my dream, of course, is to take Nick to one of these, just to let him have a chance. Again, comes into our money system.
Right.
After our basic finances have been paid out, we've got £5 a week left to pay for holidays, clothes, Christmas, birthdays, education. So where does Nick come in? We simply cannot take him. I mean, we can't realise his potential. I mean, we must cross our fingers and wait and hope. You know, I mean, it's wrong.
That can't be right, Kenneth.
Which?
Of course it can.
What's just been said there?
No, but I was taking Jimmy up on the point that every human being has equal potential. They haven't. Not every human being. Not every human being has. And then he said...
Well, I'm sorry, back to the main point. I mean, there's a situation where...
Pardon?
I didn't say they had equal potential. I say every human being has got potential. And let's develop that potential to the maximum. I mean, it's absurd to say that everyone has equal potential. We know that's not true. You've not got the brain of Einstein. I've not got the brain that you have. You've not got the brain. I've got very good, but we've got potential.
What a good thing we are different.
Yes, indeed. But we've still got potential. Let's develop each person's potential.
Yes, well, I live in a society which gave me many opportunities to develop it. I live in a society which I have come to adore. I mean, I actually love the idea of rich men riding about in Rolls-Royce motor cars. I don't want one myself. I like the idea of ladies. I like the idea I actually like the idea of ladies drifting about in mink, but I don't want mink. I don't even want a mink jockstrap. I really don't. But I think the idea of someone that does want it is very nice. And same way, I think the idea of a Solzhenitsyn writing his books is very nice.
Yes,
I think a government that represses him is wrong and evil.
But wait a minute.
Evil.
But never mind about mink jockstraps and stuff like that. I mean, what about Mrs. Pierce's kid? I mean, that's terribly important. And any society that doesn't help her to the fullest is wrong.
Certainly.
Absolutely wrong. Well, then, let me hear you argue, let me hear you justify that situation.
Well, I'm saying that we've all got in our society the chance of choice. I am not saying we've got a perfect society. I'm not saying that for a minute. I don't think one exists in the world. And I think when you find this utopia, there'll be very little left to aspire for.
Mrs. Pierce, can I have you again, please?
I want Nicholas to reach for the stars, and possibly this never will be. Perhaps he'll only be a little boy who picks daisies, but I want him to be the very best daisy picker that there ever was.
Can I make a point here? You see, this is really getting to the nub of the problem, or the issue. You see, listen, Kenneth, what's life all about? I mean, if you die and somebody says, this fellow had a house in Monte Carlo, 22 rooms, he had a house in London, the Nash Terraces, he had a shooting estate in Scotland, and he had coloured televisions in every damned room that he owned, including a toilet. And goodbye, Joe Bloggs, you've been a success. In my opinion, he's been an abysmal failure. But if somebody dies and they say on his death that he's advanced and improved the human condition, even if it's a little bit, that life's been more significant than all the mansions and all the wealth and all the success in the rat race that anyone might achieve.
Yes, well,
and I say to Mrs. Pierce, it shouldn't be a question of going to the States for treatment for her son. We should be fighting here in Britain, because we are a rich country, to have priorities that pay attention to children such as your child, but to all children. They're the future. In my opinion, that a person's attitude towards children is a giveaway to their humanity. And if they've got a negative, let the big fish eat the wee fish mentality, let us all grovel and backstab and claw their way to the top, then in my opinion they might be a success by normal evaluations and normal standards, but by any human standards of decency, they're abysmal human failures. And I think that's the point.
Can I put a point to you, though, now, and this goes back to something I was saying to you earlier when I was trying to get out of you what the purpose of unions were. I don't think it takes a stretch of the imagination, Jimmy, to take Mrs. Pierce's case. To say that her husband's a member of a union, why isn't that union doing something about her child?
Wait a minute. Okay, so you clap.
No, it's a fair point, I think.
No, it's not really, honestly, Michael. I'll tell you why it's not a fair point. Tell you why it's not a fair point. Because unions shouldn't be charitable organisations. They should be fighting for a living standard for the people of this country that doesn't require charity. That they get things which are given by charity, so-called. Oh, the people that are given charity, they feel good. In my opinion, the society that we should be striving for is one in which charity is unnecessary in the sense that it's thought of today, because it should be human rights. It should be the right of each human being. And unions can't undertake that responsibility. First of all, you're taking on the responsibility of society. You should be spending your money to change society in order that charities in that sense are unnecessary.
Why don't we hear unions talking about the educational change that they need and the medical change and so on? Why don't we hear them talking about this? Because it is true that they're mostly talking about having more money and so on and more time off. Why don't we hear it?
I accept that. I mean, I'm not here as an apologist for the trade union movement in Britain as it is today. What I am saying is that without the trade union movement, the living standards and conditions of the ordinary working class family of this country would be far worse than they are today. It's by no means perfect. In many instances, they're moribund. In many instances, there's a lack of creative thinking about where the trade union movement's going, what its attitude should be, how it should be investing, yes, in the education of young trade unionists to make them better trade unionists, and that would be more effective trade unionists. I'm not here as an apologist for all the blemishes in the trade union movement. I would like to improve the trade union movement, but I'll argue the fundamental case that they are a engine room for social progress and social advance in this country, and I defy anyone to tell me that that's not the case.
Could I have that gentleman there with his hand up?
Unions do educate people. I left school when I was 14. I worked in the pit for 20 years, crawling about on the coal face like an animal. Through the union, I got day release course. From day release course, I've got to university where I'm studying now. Only through a trade union, not through the educational system or anything else. I was a cast-off at 14.
But there's an argument to be made, Jimmy, and there's all I was trying to say when we were discussing Mrs. Pearson, that the unions ought to have a bigger base altogether, that they ought to spread into areas. It might seem a wild idea, but at least it's worth considering.
Except they can't take the responsibility for these things. They should be agitating and campaigning. For example, I'd like to say the unions fighting for higher old age pensions and using our industrial power for higher old age pensions. I mean, but you can't expect the unions to pay for higher old age pensions. It's just an actuarial impossibility for them to do that. What they can do is use their industrial power not only for those workers who are employed at this moment who have got a certain bargaining counter, but to use it also for the underprivileged, for the old age pensioners and all the rest of it, because after all, the old age pensioners that are suffering in this country are working class old age pensioners.
Could I make a point? 'Cause I do have to get away, you know. But the point I would like to make is this. We obviously have equal ground. We do have some equal ground, and this is the most important thing in any society, isn't it? The areas on which one can find common agreement. I think the Forster argument of only connect is a valid one. Don't you think it's a valid one?
It's important.
So do I. So I think, you know, all this really arose out of Benjamin's comment on the desecration of our environment by terrible office blocks and things which have dehumanized many areas of society. Where I cited the instance of...
Kenneth, by property developers, not
yes,
the
of
workers.
course.
Yeah.
So my point was that should not have happened. And I said, moreover, that the office development permit, which was brought into being by George Brown, was brought in far, far too late. You know, it came in the last 2 years of the Labour government. Should have been introduced far earlier. In other words, the priority should have been homes. And this is what this discussion came out of. Because I did say people should march about that as an issue, because a roof over your head seems to me to be a fundamental right. And I think that anyone who cashes in on human need, and I regard housing, food, and
we're in common ground there.
Education as a common need. I think anyone who cashes in on that is little short of a scoundrel. And there's a lot of that cashing in going on. The gazumping of property, all these things that have gone on. You know it goes on.
Yes,
the ordinary working man's caught in the same trap, because they'll say to him, ask more for your house, because if you want a better one, you won't get it unless you ask more. You know what I mean? So he's caught in the same trap, isn't he? The ordinary little man who owns a house, I mean.
Not particularly.
Well, he is, if he owns...
I'm telling you. No,
well, he's caught in a trap because he must. Well, if he's going to provide, if he wants another room for another child or whatever he wants, and he wants to move, the agent says to him, we know this goes on, ask more than you paid.
Well, I saw Alf Garnett the other night, well, a few months ago, actually. He's sitting there saying, look at this, the Tories have made me a wealthy property owner. This house is worth £10,000. So his son-in-law says, but so's the house next door. And so's the house next door, and so's the house next door to that. And the mother chips in, no, it isn't. She says, why not? She says, that was bombed. That's where the butcher parked his van. I don't know if you saw that plot. So it's only a cash value. If your house is enhanced in value, it's worth £10,000. If you want to buy a house with another room, it's got to cost you £12,000 or £14,000 by definition, and therefore it's only paper values. The real scoundrels are the property developers.
But that's particularising. But in general, we're agreed, right, that you should not cash in on human need.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think the priorities of government, good government, ensure that. For a start, you don't, and you're not allowed to cash in on human need, i.e. that property should not be allowed to take precedence over homes, domestic homes for people.
Can I give you a definition I think you might agree with? That a society should be run on the basis of social need and not private greed.
Absolutely, yes, we're all in agreement. I think everyone would be in agreement here.
You agree with that?
I think everyone would be in agreement here. Everyone would be in agreement. And so, if we start off with housing as a definite priority, you would not agree?
Oh, absolutely. Right. Social service.
Right, and so should food. Food should be at a price that everyone can afford and get plenty of if they want it. Clothing, obviously, should not be prohibitive. Because clothing is another human need. Then we come to education, because these are the priorities, aren't they? They've got to be in that priority. Right, education. Now, Isaiah Berlin is one of the few people that has said, I mean, I'm talking about people of what I would call weighty academic status, that obviously class structure in schooling should be abolished. And it's obvious that it should, because no child should start off with any kind of handicap. And he is going to start off with a handicap, no matter how much he knows, if his accent doesn't fit the milieu, right?
Yeah.
So that is another priority, isn't it?
I think
the
you'll be
reform of education, right?
I think you'll be joining equity shortly. That's good.
Don't you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, these are fundamental issues.
Yeah.
Why is it that every time we've had a socialist administration in this country, and incidentally, when Harold Wilson came into office, many of my friends said, when Harold Wilson came into office, at last we're going to see the end of the jobs for the boys and this planning crap that goes on for office blocks everywhere. We're going to see the end to that. We're going to see people placed as a priority. What instead did we see? We saw office blocks go up all the time.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you had a law tomorrow passed to say just this, that all property in London that was originally built for domestic usage should be returned to it, you would no longer have homeless people in London. Now, that is a fact, because so much has been usurped. There's domestic property in London which has been usurped by offices. And if your answer to that is, oh, drive them out and you'll drive out a source of employment, I say you won't, because their offices will be forced to move to the suburbs where there are masses of dormitory towns anyway, with people who have no life at all.
I accept all this. I absolutely accept it.
I mean, I don't know what you're...
Thank you.
I absolutely accept it.
Well, of course, but I mean, the arguments seem to be about more profound things, like opportunities and things, and frustrations in people in this country, which are undeniably there. I mean, never mind about office blocks and things like that. There are more important things than that we've been discussing here.
Well, James and I had to get our priorities, and we were saying these are priorities. James agreed with me that they were, didn't you?
I agree that they're certainly priorities. I agree with all the priorities that you've established. I've got to make this point, mind you, that in job satisfaction, there's... what's happening, Kenneth, in industry, whether you know it or not, in order to maximise the profit margins on capital investment, there's more shift work now. More tiresome, repetitive jobs. Shift work is almost by definition antisocial. There's more injuries occurring in industry now. This is part of the scene which a lot of sociologists deliberately, in my opinion, ignore. There are real problems of the over-centralisation of economic decision-making in bigger monopoly, big business combines, the centralisation of political decision-making, and there's a whole structure being developed whereby the people feel that they are out with any of the real decision-making processes in our country.
Right,
which was a theme of my editorial called alienation.
Let me reply to that. You are adding to it, in actual fact, by referring to them in this way, James, because you're giving them a power they don't possess. You're saying, using phrases like powers, vast monopolies. They are controlled by some bugger. Let's get at him. Don't make them out to be monolithic and fabulous that you can't reach them. You can reach them. And the trade union movement, in terms of the TUC, could keep round the table the government, the legislators, and stick there night in, night out, if necessary, if they cared enough, and force a compromise, because compromise there must always be.
They'll talk till the cows go home.
What does that mean in detail? I mean, you talk about putting a knife in, but what does it mean?
Putting a what?
What does it mean? How's all this going to happen? I mean, what do you want the TUC to do?
We've listed our priorities.
Yeah, I know, but you're not going to get it from talking. No, I must say.
Can I just put a final point?
You listed your priorities, Mr. Williams, but do you know why these trade union and government talks just failed quite recently?
Go on.
Because the priority of pensions was not on the agenda, and the government refused to talk to the trade union leaders on the questions of pensions. And that is one of the criteria why those discussions failed.
What would happen if they refused to finish the discussion and just sat there and sat there and sat there and said, you'll have to remove us bodily, we're going to sit here until we do get an answer, do get a compromise, because all of living is a compromise. All of living is a compromise. A man and his wife will tell you they're living together happily is some sort of compromise. It has to be. For her to retain her individuality and for him to retain his.
Yeah.
No. All of life is a compromise.
You know, on the basis of that, there are 8 million people living together today are old age pensioners who have to compromise with our society to try to live on the bare minimum pensions that this government allows it. And a point that you made earlier in your programme, the other programme, about the trade unions only demanding wages. Safety is one of our demands. Pensions, and my own union, the Transport and General Workers Union, have led in this, the pensions campaign. We've had 2 national stoppages, inviting our members to support us. We have had 2 rallies in London where our cab section actually ferried pensioners from the stations, from the bus depots, to the House of Commons to lobby so that they could put over their demands. Voluntary trade union members.
But all agreements eventually are made around a table, aren't they? No agreements are made with paving stones.
Look,
I mean, wasn't it? We've got to open men's eyes, not tear them out. I mean, surely you agree about that.
Sadly, we're at the end. There's never enough time. Jimmy, go on.
Well, look, I want to make the point here. If Vic Feathers sat in a room with Ted Heath and just was content to talk to him, in many instances, compromise is an outcome. Sometimes there are principles involved, there's something else that's got to be fought for beyond the compromise, if there's a fundamental principle. But if you sit round the table, as you're talking, in a protracted way, as if that's going to move this government, I think Feathers will come out of the discussions at some stage or other with political hemorrhoids. You will need to involve the industrial power of the working class to shift and change a government that's not prepared to budge otherwise. Heath says to the unions, no surrender. I think the unions should say to Heath, no surrender on our members' interests, and we'll fight. If you want a confrontation, we'll have a confrontation. But you've made the confrontation, not us. It's got to come to that, Kenneth, I'm afraid.
The strike will still do no one any good.
Well,
take that away and we've got nothing.
Well, I do think one of the good things that comes out of it all is that we do live in a society where we can say these things, and the probability is, and all education does begin somewhere, with listening to somebody and imbibing something of their ideas. I think it was you quoted Shelley, wasn't it, earlier on? And he also said, we are a product of everything we've ever loved. And indeed, that is true. Something brushes off on all of us. And I do like life, common or garden or what you will, and I do get a thrill from it still. And
that'll teach me never to be rude to you again, won't it?
No, I don't mind you being rude, 'cause I know it wasn't born of malignance. No, I don't mind that.
Right, well, that's it, sadly. Thank you, Jimmy Reid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth Williams, and the audience too. Thank you very much indeed. Until next week, goodbye.